Hello everyone. Making this video in English, thinking that maybe more parties will be interested in this test that I'm going to show. Um, before proceeding, before going on, I would just want to say that everything what you're about to see, it's only for test purposes. I do not recommend to do this as it may be illegal in some areas, some countries. So this is for test purposes. I do not recommend to do this and leave it like this on your car. So this, what I'm going to do from now on, it's only for test purposes. Okay, so we're in my shop, in my den, and I'm going to replace the halogen lights. It's a Mondeo MK5. Okay, so I'm going to replace the halogen lights with LED lights just to see if it will be an improvement. The main advantage here is that, as you can see, the distance from the base of the lamp till where it emits the light is the same. Okay, that I think is the main advantage. So these are H7. Okay, these are H7. The short beam are H7 light bulbs. You're going to see it in the description as well. H7 light bulbs. Okay. So we have those sockets. We have, these are the daytime running lights and long beam. Okay, they have three sockets, three plugs, just like this one. Okay, and again, it's supposed to emit the light at the same distance from the base. Okay, so yeah, you can see that emits the light the same distance from the base, as you can see. Okay, this is the base in the old one, and this is the base, the new one. Okay, so it emits the light in the same area. Okay, good. So I'm going to show you after I put it on to the test to see the difference. And I mean, this you know how to exchange these ones. I don't think that anyone has a doubt. And try not to touch the LED part, just to avoid it, just to be sure. It's better, I think. No. So all of this, we're gonna mount it inside the lamp. Okay, so I'm gonna put the long beam, the short beam, the position light, the other one, and go back to the car and see how to mount the fog lamps. Okay. Before cutting this part off, I just want to say, if you like my videos, please subscribe to the channel. So, okay, we'll be back with the fog lamps. Okay, so I'm now an hour in my 30 minutes job, and I haven't put all the lights on. Thing is, this is an LED. This comes with a plus and a minus. Okay, so you can just plug this in anyway. Both wires are black. When I went to school, they taught me that the red one has to be always the plus, but turns out I'm just an old guy that, yeah, things aren't done as before. So went to the car, put this thing, had to try it with the battery, because on the old light, on the old bulb, doesn't say either which one is the plus or the minus or the negative. On the socket either, can't find out which is the plus, which is the minus. Try it with the bulb, put the wires, try it with the battery. It lights up both ways, even if I put the red one to the plus and then black to the negative, even if I put it in reverse, it lights up both ways. So the only option I have left is plug this in the car, take a multimeter and check which one of these two is the plus, which one is the negative. Why the fuck couldn't they put just the plus with the red wire? I mean, just crying out loud. God. Okay, so this is the fog lamp that I removed. This is the new one. Again, the light emitting part is the same area, so shouldn't disturb a lot. This goes down there like this. Yeah, that's it. This piece of crap, you have to, these two ears, you have to pull them all aside and then pull back. And now just gonna put it on. That sounded right. That sounded just right. So just this is change them. No, just like that. Easy peasy. Always test them before putting everything back. Just plug them in, have a test, like I'm about to do now. Okay, so real fast, I've put the multimeter to these two sockets. If it wouldn't be in reverse as the colors I put, it would be a negative. Try that on the battery. You can try on the battery and then be sure it's a negative. Also, make sure this is right, because this is the LED position lamp. Just if it doesn't light on, change the way it was put in. God damn it. Now it lights on. Also with the fog lamp, doesn't light on, so we have to change the position on that one also. So just a quick talk about how to remove the front bumper, because in order to remove the headlight, probably you know by now, you have to remove the front bumper. So we have three pieces of shit like this in the front. Looks like this. So you need to remove first the top part and then remove it all. When you put it back, the same thing. Can do it with the camera. Okay, so that's it. Use these things to remove it. They're cheap, some local website, so first you remove this part and then you remove the whole. Okay, so we have three on this side, 1, 2 and 3. We have 2 here in the bottom, 1 and 2, 7 millimeters bolts here, some star keys, again some piece of crap like that, plastic. Again here, remove from there, from here, from there. So these are the short beam, and that's how it looks. Pretty cool. So I'm gonna do now a comparison of the halogen and the LED lights. Before doing that, before watching that, please subscribe, like if you like this kind of posts. Give me a comment and thoughts about this idea. Thanks. So now you're gonna see the comparison: short beam before and after, high beam before and after, and so on. Hope you enjoyed, and we're gonna end it up after the comparison. If you don't like this video in English, please let me know, and I'll stop doing them or switch back to Romanian. Okay, have fun, everyone. Bye. So I just want to say, I know I said that the video's over. Just want to say that the camera doesn't do justice. The the difference is huge. It's huge. The difference is just huge. Amazing. Just amazing. Yeah, definitely worth it. Definitely amazing.